July 6th on this fabulous Tuesday. And it means around here on the Common Good podcast, we get to talk about politics. And today we're going to be joined by Erica Smith, who has offered herself to be our next senator from the great state of North Carolina. So she's going to be joining us halfway in. And, like every day, we want to know where you're coming from. Erica's going to be coming from North Carolina. I'm here in Minneapolis. Robb Ryerse is just outside of Fayetteville, Arkansas. And I don't know why I can't give you a real town that you're from, just outside of a more famous place, Springdale.
I'm actually in Fayetteville, Arkansas right now, and
right
every time you say I'm just outside of Fayetteville, Arkansas.
Is that so? Well, Robb, right in the heart of Fayetteville, Arkansas, a state that used to be reliably Democratic in its elected officials has been changing over recent years, as does the country. And so there's a lot for us to mention today. Let us know in the chat where you're listening from, what it is that you're up to, and what the nature of your state is like. And Robb, it was just 6 months ago today, on the 6th of January, that the Trump-led insurrectionists attacked the Capitol, beat police officers, broke in, and tried to capture members of Congress in order to stop the certification of the next president of the United States. One of the, just to me, will remain my adulthood, one of the darkest days of our civic engagement that I, has been anywhere around my lifetime. The Civil War was clearly of another scale, so I don't want to minimize that. But this was particularly bad because it was led by the duly elected president of the United States to try to prevent the election of the then duly elected president of the United States. And the fact that all gets thrown under the bus and thrown into through the broken windows into the Capitol is horrible. And we just can't stop talking about it. At least I don't want to stop talking about it. And it's funny that all the people that I know, and I know you have some, read some polling on this, all the people I know who want to stop talking about it are people that support Trump. And I get that. You don't like the idea that your guy, the person you've supported, the person you defended, the person you went out there and stood in line to say, I'm with him, led an insurrection against the United States of America. And if you don't like the word insurrection, just say people carrying his flags, literally flags, not American flags, flags with Trump's face and name on it, wearing his hats, literally branded as him, attacked the United States Capitol Police, the members of Congress, and broke into the Capitol and rioted throughout it. So maybe just call them rioters if you're comfortable with that. I know some people like to argue about whether it was an insurrection or not. I'm quite comfortable calling it an insurrection, a terrorist act, and a band of vile rioters. So anyway, it's been 6 months. I'm clearly not over it. I don't know if I ever will be.
Yeah, I'm not over it either, and we cannot move on from this until justice is served. And it's a good thing that that Nancy Pelosi has pushed ahead with a January 6th commission to investigate what took place. Now, we wanted that to be something that had the full weight and the full support of the legislative branch of our federal government, but like so many other things, that was that opportunity was squandered in the United States Senate, and so now the House is pushing ahead with their own commission to look into what happened on January 6th, and Liz Cheney, Congresswoman from the great state of Wyoming, is going to be on that. That's significant because she's a Republican, which means it's a bipartisan commission. It's not merely political pandering, but Liz Cheney, as I'm sure everyone remembers, was stripped of her leadership role in the Republican caucus in the House of Representatives because she dared to suggest that Joe Biden actually won the election and that Donald Trump had, sparked an insurrection through his words at the Stop the Steal rally. So, I'm hopeful that even though we're 6 months on, I'm hopeful that we're going to have the opportunity to fully understand what took place. Now, I mean, a really fantastic piece of reporting came out last week from the New York Times with about about a 40-minute, episode of television, just about that is recreating the events of the insurrection on January 6th, kind of detailing them. Using cell phone footage and security cameras, but mostly cell phone footage, which is really fascinating. We've gotten to this point where people document what they're doing all on their own.
Well, and this is the thing about that, Rob, that when they pull this, video that people were posting, the insurrectionists, the Trump-backed rioters attacking the Capitol, they thought that what they were doing was such a good thing, they should be streaming it.
Yeah.
Like they didn't even
shame at all
believe that what they were doing was somehow a violation. Like this is not like other kinds of terrorist attacks, right? So say Timothy McVeigh, or say the shooter in Las Vegas, or the shooters in other public spaces that were meant to be political attacks. They're always trying to get away with that stuff without getting caught. This was the opposite of that. These terrorists said, no, we can't believe this is actually working. You can hear them in the videos that I've seen, the portions I've seen of that New York Times part, basically saying, I can't believe this is working. Some of them saying this is like God's divine hand has guided us, right? Like these people are doing this brazenly, trying to convince themselves and everyone else that what they're doing is such a powerful and great and good thing. It's just simply riveting that this is the perspective that people had, which is a different kind of terrorism, right? It's a kind that you say there is no shame. Yes, that's also, and there's just also no hiding it. To this very day, they don't hide it. You and I met. I met a Proud Boy down in a group of Proud Boys, and I've been interacting with those guys. I met them down in Florida back in October. I've been interacting with them around this. They're still acting as if they were the righteous ones who were harmed by the police. Like they have flipped this entire thing into them being the victims, and the police and the Biden administration being the perpetrators. It's just simply beyond delusional. It is just into a totally separate world of thinking about all this. Maybe that is delusional. So maybe it's just fully delusional. It's out of this world.
I highly recommend this New York Times video for people to watch. It is a hard watch. This is not, an entertaining episode of television, to sit and, go to sleep to. It is a hard watch, but it's tremendously important because of all of the things that you learn and the pieces it puts together. You learn that there were 8 breaches into the Capitol building. You learn some of the key players who were involved. And what was interesting in all of the talk about, I even have family members who in the aftermath of January 6th, when I talk with family members about it, I have family members who've suggested that, well, that was really just Antifa, getting bussed in to, spark this thing. And you learn there was no Black Lives Matter protesters that were, infiltrating. There was no Antifa that was infiltrating. These were Trump supporters from the Proud Boys and other groups. Yeah, the Oath Keepers and other groups that were very proudly doing this.
Yeah, and they were bussed in, but not by Antifa. Yeah. They were bussed in by church groups. There were thousands of people bussed in on church buses for the rally that then turned into an insurrection.
Yeah, right. And I think that I think it's important to make this distinction that there were a number of people involved who fully planned on this and executed the insurrection and the storming the Capitol, precisely according to plan. I think one of the other things I learned from the video is that there was certainly some kind of mob mentality that took over, that there was, people who were on those buses who had no plans of, going through a broken window
Didn't think
into
I
the
was going to
United
break into
States
the
Capitol
Capitol
building.
today, but
Right.
lo and
Like,
behold, the
yeah,
opportunity
yeah,
presented itself.
exactly. That's and that's not to say that they're not responsible, because they absolutely are, and they need to be held accountable. Uh, but it's such a fascinating thing to see when that anger and rage gets worked up in people, and there are others who are seeking to
Yeah.
manipulate, the crowd, that they can do that. And it's a scary thing to think what can happen when a crowd gets ginned up into a
That's
frenzy
right.
over some perceived slight, like, falsely believing that an election was stolen.
Well, and it's not only happening among just casual rally observers, but across the board now, people are believing this notion that Trump was wrongly defeated in the election. Now that comes in different scales too, and people do an awful lot of conflating. So there's people who believe that China shipped in ballots that have bamboo in the paper content. That's what's going on in Arizona, that kind of business. People believe that voting tabulations were changed. There's people who believe that whole boxes were thrown out or brought in. There's that. Then there's the other side where people say, I just think we should have never allowed for a change in voting requirements because of the pandemic, like allowing people to vote absentee or do mail-in voting. That shouldn't have been able to happen on such quick notice around an election that was so important. Those are the two continuum of people who are arguing, hey, there was something afoot about the election. So when you push a lawmaker who says, there was some funny business going on, you're like, well, what? Then they'll say that second bit. Well, not every legislature made the decision. Sometimes it was just an elections official in a state that said you could do mail-in ballots. And how come we had so many drop boxes? That's way more than normal. Like, all that was unusual, right? There's that argument. To which the answer is because everyone was trying to figure out how you do this in a pandemic when people can't get near each other. So there's that story. Gets conflated with all the other pieces, and the people who hold to that, things weren't just done the way all the other elections were done. Those people are playing off the energy and the fear of the bamboo in the paper and the ballots being pushed in, and somehow the country of Turkey changing, interfering in the satellite transmission of ballot counts, or all this stuff that Trump is actually talking about himself to this very day. So all of that is in the continuum of this election was a little funky. And all of that is what's created the context in which someone can say, we need to look at ballot, integrity and election integrity. So granting that caveat, that some people are only talking about, did the state of Pennsylvania have the authority without the legislature to change the mail-in ballot request form? I mean, that just is, that's the argument, they try to go to court on. All of this trying to create some measure of legitimacy that, the election wasn't fair because somehow, somewhere along the line, something went bad. All of that has been thrown out by courts. All of that has been dispensed with in the legal matters. Everything in the election was good and fair and safe. Now, there might be other built-in systems about elections that we do and don't like, and we've talked about that a lot here, that don't work for people, and we need to keep making our elections better and better. But there was nothing about this one that was done that made any of the outcome to be put in jeopardy. But they're conflating that intentionally to try to stir up the 30% of people who would attack a Capitol and would use violence. And if you believe that it's only a super fringe, and I hear this all the time, that little fringe of people, really? You got more than 10,000 people to rush on the Capitol out of the number of people that showed up at that rally, and you think that's fringy? That seems to me like that's a pretty decent accomplishment if you got that much kind of action.
Yeah. And I mean, we need to remember, Doug, that, while Donald Trump was roundly defeated in the 2020 presidential election, he was, destroyed in the popular vote and destroyed in the electoral college vote as well, and roundly defeated. He also got the second most votes in American history.
Yeah, right.
We're just lucky that, Joe Biden got more. And that's, one of the things that Trump comes back to. You'll hear him say, well, they told me I needed,
Yes.
what was it? 64,000 votes, 64 million votes, something like that.
Yeah.
And he's like, we got more than that. Like,
so I should have won.
Like, right. Like that, yes, in any other election that would have won, but the other guy got more than that. But, my point is that we have a significant number of people in our country, tens of millions of people, who, after everything that happened through the Trump presidency, through all of the ridiculousness, all of the corruption, all of the cruelty, all of the incompetence, through all of it, a near record number of people voted for him to have the opportunity to keep going.
They all asked for a refill. They asked for a Donald Trump refill at the restaurant.
And so, this is not a fringy thing. And Doug, that I am absolutely terrified that, as we move into the midterm elections, that, what we're going to get is, the full Trumpification of the Republican Party, to the point that, historically, in the midterm elections, which is the congressional elections that happen 2 years into a president's first term in office, that first term midterm that happens in kind of the off year from presidential elections. Typically, the party that is out of power wins significantly and picks up a lot of seats in the House of Representatives and a lot of seats in the United States Senate, depending on how many. Now, every seat in the House of Representatives is up for grabs. Not every seat is up for grabs in the United States Senate. Now, that happens because, as I've made the argument, that I think the most important thing when it comes to political engagement is enthusiasm. Mm-hmm. That's what you need from people, is enthusiasm. Yeah. And typically when a party is in control, when they've got the presidency, maybe they control the House as well, they get a little complacent. They get the sense of like, okay, well, we're winning. And they move into some kind of like, prevent defense. And the other side gets super motivated and gets, like really ginned up, has that enthusiasm. And so I fear we're going to see that from on the Republican side. And the thing that scares me is not just that Republicans have the chance of taking the House and the Senate back, but it's the type of Republicans that will take the House and the Senate back. That it will not be Liz Cheney's and Mitt Romney's, who I have significant policy differences with. Yeah. However, they believe in democracy.
Yeah, and at least Liz like Cheney, who also said, I did vote for Donald Trump on November 3rd. So she didn't even have the wisdom, common sense to not vote for the guy. She changed her tune after January 6th. That's what it took for her. So she's a late bloomer when it comes to figuring out the right path. So you're right. So it's not even those people. I mean, he maintained holding so many Republicans to republicanism, even though we made the argument and we're successful in all of our arguments and people in the country agreed that so many Republicans walked away. But if you maintained your Republican identity, you stuck with Trump. If you dropped your Republican identity, that's what was required for you to leave Trump. So these people are something else. And to your point, this story from the Washington Post says that 1/3 of those who have registered as candidates for the upcoming elections with the Federal Elections Commission, of nearly 700 of the Republicans, 1/3 of them. So I don't know, you kind of got to figure out the math on that. 200 and something, 220 of those people have registered at the state level and at the Congress, at the House level. Those people are supporters of Trump's big lie. So you're right that 1/3 of the people that have said, elect me rather than the current person, and sometimes that's a current person who does not buy Trump's lie, these people are primarying other Republicans, and they are 1/3 bought in to not only the lie, and you can't buy into the big lie and not buy into the insurrection, right? I mean, how would you do that? You would say, oh, I think he was cheated and I think we have a wrongfully elected president, but, that's sort of how it goes. You just can't do both of those. This is why people were saying for 4 years, if Donald Trump loses his reelection, he's going to cause, a terrible problem. And lo and behold, it's exactly what they did. Hey, Mike has a comment on here that I want to. He's asking about.
Yeah. Can I just?
Yeah, please.
Can I just make a quick point before we do that? So, I'm just looking up how many seats are up for grabs. So there's 435 seats in the House of Representatives, all that are up for grabs. 34 Senate seats are up for re-election. So there's about 470 federal races, and 700 Republicans have filed paperwork
for those nearly
seats.
500. Yeah.
Now, not all of those 700 Republicans are challenging Democrats. I think you're absolutely right, Doug, that what we're going to see here is some infighting within the Republican Party with Trump supporting Republicans primarying and trying to knock off the more moderate, level-headed, democracy-believing Republicans, and that is, something to be concerned about. So
I do think some of the argument needs to be this may not work, but back to the point that I was making earlier, we have to separate out those who say there was something funny about the election from the people who say, like, maybe we shouldn't have made changes to receiving ballots or receiving your application for your absentee ballot so easy. Separate those people out from those who say someone changed, someone cheated, all the rest of that, right? Because that not making that distinction, and for people who oppose these Republicans like me, to throw all of them in there together because we want to soil that one group with the insurrectionist-driven group, that only strengthens the insurrectionist group. I think we have to put a wedge between them and make sure that candidates and other people are asked very specifically, what is it that you're suggesting happened? And not let them just simply say, well, things weren't all that normal, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because that lack of normalcy is where the problem comes from. And one more story that I think is worth raising. We've been saying this for a long time.
And this goes along with Mike's question too. This goes
very
along
much.
With Mike's question.
Mike's question was, do you think that the January 6th insurrectionists are not all that much different from the Taliban, who think that their actions are right and they're obeying Allah? And I do think so. In fact, we've been doing a lot of work around Christian nationalism, and there's a new article out today in the Washington Post about who the people are that have been arrested, the people that were arrested at the Capitol and who they are, and how deeply their self-proclaimed Christian faith has driven them. And what's curious about it is the thing that they're now finding in studies that we've been saying for a long time. Many of these people that support Trump and are Christian nationalists and show up in polls as evangelicals and other Christians supporting Trump are the kind that are not connected at all to any of the structures, peoples, or institutions of Christianity. They're free-form people that hold their own beliefs, often a concoction of all kinds of other stuff. Now, look, I am not letting Christians off the hook for this. I'm just saying that the difference between the people who go to, First Baptist Church somewhere outside of Fayetteville, Arkansas, don't support Trump as high as the people who never go to a church anywhere and claim their Christian identity. And this article makes this point. It reads like this: Christian nationalists are not necessarily religious by conventional metrics, such as going to church or being part of religious organizations or scripture reading. Several studies in recent years have found differences between Christian nationalists who are religious and those who are less so. Americans who have Christian nationalist belief and do not attend church are more likely to have voted and supported Trump compared with those who attend more regularly. This has been a really important point that we've been trying to make in this conversation. We should ask our pastors, we have to demand that our pastors do a better job of the people in their congregations. But that's not where it's coming from. More than 50% of people who claim Christian faith in the United States don't involve themselves in any kind of organized faith at all. In fact, this is what keeps showing up in the polling. Like, America is so much less Christian than it ever used to be, because they ask people, like, do you go to church regularly? Do you consider yourself part of a denomination? Do you consider yourself? And people say no. So then we say, well, then they're not religious. No, it just means they're not going to church anywhere. They're not being involved in any of these actions and activities. That is really different then are you rooted into a Christian narrative, which these people are, which then gets blended in with all these other notions and ideas. And this is where some really deep problems come from in our elections and in how we talk about these voters and how we think about them. So that's what I think is going on. It doesn't explain all of it. Yes, there are people in First Baptist Church somewhere outside of Fayetteville, Arkansas, that are voting for Trump. But the people that are in that one basket, remember when Hillary Clinton said there's three baskets? There's like the conservative, fiscal conservative Republicans, and then there's like the social conservative Republicans, and then there's this other basket. You might call them a basket of deplorables, that group. Well, what happened was, like, when our kids were young and were doing their laundry, they would all take their laundry baskets into our basement by our washer and dump them all together, and all their laundry got all mixed up. That's what's going on. Now the whole Republican Party has a mixed up basket of nonsense.
Yeah. And this is probably a conversation for another time, but we ought to talk some time about which was a more unfortunate metaphor, the basket of deplorables or the binder full of women, that Mitt Romney had.
One of them was accurate, and one of them wasn't. All right. Hey, Rob, we've got our fantastic guest with us, Erica Smith.
Well, listen. So, as we think about, who's going to control the House and the Senate in 2022 and beyond, one of the critical races that we're going to need to watch is the Senate race in North Carolina. It is an open seat. And so, there's not an incumbent. There's been some conversation that one of the Trump daughter-in-laws, Laura Trump, was thinking about jumping into this race. It sounds like she's not considering that now. So it's going to be real interesting to see what happens on the Republican side. But on the Democratic side, one of the candidates that is running for this seat is Erica Smith, and Erica is joining us. Erica, good morning. Thank you so much for being with us.
Good morning. So glad to join you today.
Erica, we couldn't be more glad that you're running for Senate in North Carolina. That state matters. Who the representatives are at the Senate level matters. And for people who think, well, that's some other state, who cares? There's something about the fact we only have 100 senators, and they make a lot of decisions about the future of this country. So in a lot of ways, senators are meant to think on behalf of and work on behalf of all of us. So we really appreciate it. I live in Minneapolis. Robb's in Arkansas, but man, we care a lot about North Carolina, and would love for you to become the senator there. Can you tell us a little bit about what caused you to say this year in 2022, I'm going to run for Senate in North Carolina?
Absolutely. Through this pandemic, we've gone through a lot in a year, and I ran in the last cycle. I ran in 2020. I was the second highest vote getter in the Democratic primary. And after this pandemic and after the November general election, I saw that there are so many things that are critical and that matter to working families across this nation. And as we look at the historic elections of Reverend Raphael Warnock, Senator Warnock now, and Senator Ossoff, and what Georgia showed us is possible when we make sure that we are advancing a platform that so many people need to not only just survive, but to also move toward thriving, which is what we want. This pandemic showed us just how broken our healthcare system is. This pandemic showed just how rigged our economy is. And so one of the reasons why I am running is because it is time for us to offer a bold platform, a progressive platform that's going to speak to the needs of working families and that's bold enough and big enough to address the many crises facing this nation.
Yeah, well said. So, Erica, tell folks a little bit about your background and what you've done previously, because you're not like many folks we've seen over recent years. We've seen a real influx of newcomers to politics, but you're not necessarily a newcomer. You've been involved in politics in North Carolina for a while now.
Yes, I have been. So I started out, North Carolina is home for me. It's where I grew up on the family farm. After having a successful career as an engineer, I worked in engineering for about 13 years. I lived in Seattle, Washington. I worked for Boeing. I also lived in Northern Virginia when I worked for the United States Patent and Trademark Office. And so, with my unique experiences, I've been in education for the last 17 years. What brought me back to North Carolina is North Carolina is home. I moved back to take care of the family farm when my dad had early onset of dementia. And what we know is my five siblings and he served his country well. He took great care of us and our mother. And we wanted to be sure he could spend his days at home. When I relocated back home in the early 2000s, 2001, I came equipped with a master's in religious studies. I became a faith based leader in the community, worked on community building, community development block grants, and making sure that we could invest in the rural parts of the state. I became a Democratic Party officer for about 12 years, and then I started serving on my school board for 6 years. And then after that, I served 3 terms in the North Carolina Senate. I am one of the only Democrats that were elected that represents a 100% rural district in North Carolina, despite those districts being racially gerrymandered in 2016 and partisan gerrymanders in 2018, knocked down by the courts. And so that speaks to the strength of the broad coalition of Black, white, and brown that we've been building, closing that rural and urban divide. And that's where Democrats need to win.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Say a little bit more about that. You use some phrases that a lot of people listening will know when we say, hey, I want a bold, progressive agenda. Would you put a sharp point on that for us? Not only about like what you mean policy-wise, but why it matters to people. You know, the biggest motivator for people not voting is they just think it doesn't matter. They think their vote doesn't matter, and they think whatever you're going to do as a senator doesn't matter, right? They're just like, hey, this is like digging in the sand at the beach. It's just not going to make any difference. Can you talk about why someone like you having a bold, progressive idea and agenda is something that would be so important for the lives of ordinary people in North Carolina and elsewhere?
It's so important. As we look at this pandemic, we saw food lines as far as the eye could see. And at the
Yeah.
same time, we had millionaires and billionaires in this country tripling their net worth. There are a lot of people who are on the sidelines because they feel their vote doesn't matter. They feel that they don't matter. And that is the critical issue. In my servant leadership, I've always been about building the capacity in people and making sure that we can create a more just society for everyone, so that it makes our government work for everyone, not just the wealthy, not just the well connected. So that's very much a part of my platform. Other descriptors, people say progressive. We say it's a survivor's agenda. We have people who had to leave the workforce, and those people need a $15 minimum wage. There are so many people talking about, well, we can't get people to come back to work. We don't have a worker shortage, we have a wage shortage. And when you are working 2 and 3 jobs as a teacher, I've experienced that struggle. And so when you're working 2 and 3 jobs just to be able to put food on the table, just to be able to afford life-saving health care, for me, healthcare is a basic human right, and that's why I fight for Medicare for all. That's why I fight for the Green New Deal and its capacity to create millions of good paying jobs and building the infrastructure, the energy system that we need for the future. As a former union member in every employment that I have worked, I know the capacity for strong union jobs and how that pay and worker conditions can strengthen families and strengthen communities. We're really looking at the pulling folks off the sidelines because they know that we are fighting for them. We are not one of those politicians who have been in this so long that we've earned so much money, we're getting paid so much money that we forgot who sent us to Washington, D.C., or who's sending us to Raleigh to represent them. And so that is one thing that I know. It's my lived experiences, it's this shared struggle. For me, it's not. I'm not one of those ones who are bought out by corporate interests, and that's why I fight so hard for these progressive values. But I think it's really, really important for us to understand that there are people struggling in the state, struggling in this nation, struggling all over this nation, and they want someone who's going to champion them, who's going to prioritize people over profits and broken systems that have done nothing but perpetuate poverty.
Well, that's fair. You got my vote. Hey,
we're moving to North Carolina.
Yeah, we might just do that. I watch a lot of senators who, when they retire, they shake their heads and they say, "You know why I'm retiring? Because it just doesn't do any good. I've been there all these years. I've done all this work. We can't get anything done. Nothing seems to be changing." You're on the other side of that. You're saying, no, I want to become the senator. So I wonder if you'll say a little bit more about those people who feel like the Senate doesn't get anything done. The voters who don't vote, and the senators and other people who are retiring, or people who've worked on their staffs. We've talked to people who've worked in the Senate system, and they're like, man, this thing is just so locked up. It just feels like the big issues I really want to deal with are not being done. Why, after all of your great experience, your clear competency, why a senator? Why that particular role? Why is that so important for you?
Well, the U.S. Senate is so important because they speak to funding this nation, funding infrastructure, investments, making sure that this country is protected, and doing our part in terms of an ethical foreign policy. For me, this has been a trajectory. I didn't just wake up and say, hey, I'm going to run for U.S. Senate today. I started on this trail 20 years ago when I became a local leader in my community and understanding the capacity of policy. We have a slogan on our website. I have great respect for Representative Ayanna Pressley, and she says that policy is personal. Policy is her love language. For us, policy is personal. I had to navigate a broken healthcare system. That's why I fight for Medicare for all. I gave birth to a medically fragile son. As is the case with many Black women, we have the highest maternal mortality rates in this country, and it's ridiculous that Black women, in terms of their care, is not a priority and hasn't been so before we had Black women serving in U.S. Congress who were fighting for those issues. Representative democracy is very important. After I became a faith-based leader in my community, I was sent to the CBC Institute, where I was trained on political campaigns and how to work my way from local leadership to federal office. And so that's just what I did. I spent those 15 years learning the rules, paying my dues, and gaining some tools in terms of how we can navigate and become effective policymakers. It is that training that I was able to receive, and doing the work, rolling up my sleeves, taking that strong work ethic that I have from growing up on the family farm and picking cucumbers, that enabled me to be able to message to rural voters as well as urban voters, and to fight for things like universal broadband, universal health care, Medicare for all, and all of those strong issues that I know that there are people on the sideline who want someone to fight for them. Why the U.S. Senate? The U.S. Senate is so important. When you look at that U.S. Senate, there are 100 U.S. senators. There isn't one like me. There isn't a single Black woman serving in the U.S. Senate, and representative democracy matters. You get different voices at the table. The diversity is what makes us strong, and it empowers us to be able to speak to marginalized communities and fight for them in a way that they've never been fought for before. I don't have to go around and ask what these communities are facing. I live in these communities. I've experienced this struggle growing up Black in the South. So that's why it's so important to have a voice like this in the U.S. Senate.
Yeah. It's such a powerful thing to think about, Erica, that, I was going to ask you about about what it would be like to be able to be the only black woman serving in the United States Senate. I think if I'm not incorrect, it is just it's. I mean, our history in terms of race relations as a nation is just deplorable in so many ways. And I think if I'm correct, there's only been 11 black senators in the history of the country. And I'm curious, like,
two of them have been women.
Yeah, two of them women. Yeah, Kamala Harris and Carol Moseley Braun. Um, talk more about why that representation matters so much, and maybe even what it would mean to you personally to fill that role and to be that person to step into that spot in that place.
Absolutely. It's the shared values and understanding our diversity makes us strong. As I shared earlier, it was when Representative Alman Adams started serving, and we had Representative Lauren Underwood to champion those issues of Black women's maternal mortality. When you have that representative democracy, you have different perspectives at the table. For me, being that voice of Black women, too often in particularly the Democratic Party, Black women have been used as the backbone of the party. They carry a lot of water. Black women were able to flip a seat in Alabama. They were able to almost get Stacey Abrams elected as governor. You look at what Black women in the New Georgia Project were able to do in Georgia and flipping two critical U.S. Senate seats at a very important time in our nation. And so instead of always being looked at as the base of the party and doing the work of the party, Black women need to be the face of the party, and they need to be supported in up ballot tickets. And so for me, it's more than just being the first Black woman. I'm not running to be something, I'm running to do something. And the capacity that I have as a member of clergy, growing up in the South, understanding the rural dynamic, understanding what is important to farmers, having grown up on a family farm and small farmers going up against big agriculture. It is those issues of understanding the importance of our faith, but also knowing that our faith informs us to build a more just society, to build a more equitable society, to build a society where women are able to be paid the same thing that males are being paid, instead of the reality, the harsh reality that we have now, that I, as a Black woman, and even when I was an engineer, I only earned 62 cents on the dollar of a white male. That is inequitable. And so fighting for equity in these systems, that has been my life's work. And I would like to do that as the next U.S. Senator and empower generations of families, lifting them out of poverty.
Erica, one of the things we spend a lot of time thinking about at Vote Common Good is how do we get faith voters to consider the Democratic candidate? Now, in some traditions, in the Black church, that's easy. The bent is that way. In other traditions, faith voters lean toward Republicans, and especially there in North Carolina, a lot of white faith voters and increasingly Hispanic faith voters are moving toward Republicans. Can you talk a bit about that? What your thoughts are on that, and how it is that your candidacy would impact that?
So often society has divided us every way except for Sunday, is what many people say in my community. And so when we look at the ways we're divided by race, we're divided by region, religion, ethnicity, gender, who we love, how we love, and all of that. I just preached at a predominantly white church. It was a very inclusive church, and it was an empowerment church. What I understand from my faith and my perspective, I come from a social justice liberation theology background. I earned my master's in theology from Howard University School of Divinity. And so I have always had a reference for social justice.
Yeah.
And so there's been too much investment in, white evangelicals feel that they should not talk to me because I'm a Democrat. And I've been told that I'm wasting my time when I talk to white evangelicals. But when I push aside those, misnomers and those false senses of who we are, once we break down those barriers and look at ways that we can come together and reason, I've preached at many predominantly white denominations. I've attended those denominations throughout my spiritual formation, growing up on a military base, going to chapel, understanding inclusion and how we all can affirm around some common principles as faith-based believers. In my church, we say the Jesus in me is the Jesus in you, so that makes you easy to love. I truly put that to practice on the ground. In my Senate districts, the 2018 district, I was predicted to lose that in the state Senate because it had a larger white population and a larger Republican population. But despite those odds, I was able to win that district with 54% of the vote. And it is because of this broad coalition and people having the opportunity, because I've reached out to them and I've had those conversations about what we can do together that we definitely agree on. And so we are not ceding anything. We are no longer ceding the religious vote. And so for us, it's the rise of the religious
Yeah.
left. Understanding there are more things that we have in common and center around those issues of elevating people and affirming their humanity and the dignity of work. Those are all topics that we have found have been barrier breakers and pull down those walls and
Yeah.
help us so that we can message and build coalitions with those who are faith-based. I see this trajectory, what Senator Warnock was able to do, and we see more evangelicals. That's not talked about as often, but
Right.
there were more evangelicals that voted for a Black Baptist minister in Georgia. Those are the same evangelicals in North Carolina that will vote for a Black woman Baptist minister.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And it's my intuition that it's not what Democrats say that drives these voters, not drives them away, but doesn't attract them. It's what they don't say. It's just these silent moments. Republicans end up baptizing everything in faith and country and family, even when it has nothing to do with faith or country or family. They just put it under the heading, they baptize it in that language, and then they pitch these ideas that have nothing to do with it. And very often Democrats who are speaking about things that are very deeply seated in a person, about their sense of goodness and rightness and faith and everything, just become quiet on these issues. And frankly, I think sometimes Black candidates who have a faith background are given a pass to talk about those issues to Democratic voters. Do you think that's also true? Like, do you think you can really speak more full-throatedly about these issues than many of these voters would have ever heard before, partly because of your background and also because of your social context?
I believe to a certain extent that does play a role, and it is because being in a faith-based community has empowered me to learn um, how to form those alliances and how to converse in a way that brings us together and not separates us. And so, I have not done that comparison, but it is very easy for me to have these conversations, whether I'm standing in the middle of a farmer's market talking to one-on-one to farmers, or whether I'm in a town hall discussion talking to various voters of various demographics and diversity.
Yeah,
Because at the end of the day, when we put aside those things that society tries to use to divide us, we find that we all want the American dream. We all want that. We all deserve it. We are all endowed by our Creator with those inalienable rights, and fighting for those rights for everyone is what we have centered ourselves on at the end of the day.
Hey, you've used the plural a number of times, and I really like it. You've said "we" at our campaign and "us." That feels intentional. That you're using that language. You're not just saying "I'm going to do this," but "we are going to do this." Is that intentional? And can you say a little bit more
That
about
is
that?
as Alexandria, as Anna Julia Cooper shared. When and where I enter, we take the entire race with us. And so
Mm.
I have used that to know that I'm not by myself. I am one U.S. Senator and I will be one in 100, but I will carry the millions of North Carolinians, the millions of Americans who believe in the dignity of work and who believe that we should have a $15 minimum wage, who believe that healthcare is a basic human right, who believe that we have to take bold action to protect the only planet that God's going to give us, who believe that there is so much connection, that the climate crisis is related to the racial justice crisis, is related to the income inequality crisis, who believe that what we believe in, and that is a moral movement toward addressing this extreme income inequality that's been further exacerbated in this pandemic, and to fight to make our government work for all of us as we deserve and no longer just for the wealthy and the well connected.
Yeah.
So that's why we say we. This is a
Yeah.
movement.
Yeah. Yeah. A great cloud of witnesses, to use a biblical phrase. So, Erica, you've done this before. You ran in 2020 and weren't successful in the Democratic primary. I'm always interested in talking with folks who are trying it again, going after it again, and give us a little insight, because most of the folks that are either watching on Facebook now or are going to be listening on the audio podcast later, the vast majority of us, never going to run for office. Like, this isn't a thing we're going to do. So I give us a little window into, like, after a disappointing outing, and it's I have run for office. It is so tremendously difficult. How do you gear back up to do it again? How do you, as, like, I'm interested in you, the human being. Like, how do you gear back up to do this again?
Okay, Rob, I agree with you. This is enormous energy. But
Yeah.
I had an opportunity to accept an appointment in the governor's office, governor's administration in North Carolina. And I was even, applied for several in President Biden's administration. But at the end of the day, I came to this decision that if I accept an appointment and if I don't run for U.S. Senate again, there isn't going to be a candidate in this race who is invested in building capacity in people, who want to prioritize communities over corporations, who's prioritizing people over profits, who's offering a bold platform that is big enough to solve the problems that working families are facing all over this state and all over this nation. I have learned from every loss in my life. We lost our 5-year-old son. That was very traumatic for us. But I I eulogized him on a Monday, and he died on November 1st. I eulogized him on Monday, November the 5th, and November 6th, I got up, I wiped my tears, and I went and voted for President Barack Obama. And so I look at what it takes, what all is at stake. And there are so many people who have my struggle, so many families who have gone bankrupt because someone got sick, so many families who haven't been paid survivors' wages. And, it's insurmountable, having to face the obstacle of bills that they have to face. And because policy is personal for me, and having to have to navigate broken systems and systems of inequality, this is what has empowered me to get up, dust myself off, and as Muhammad Ali said, get knocked down 7 times, get up 8. I have
Nice.
gotten up. We have built a powerful, strong campaign coalition, and we're bringing a progressive agenda that is big enough to solve these problems. And this is why I fight, because I'm not fighting for myself. I'm fighting for everyone else who shares this common struggle in America, and fighting for us to have that opportunity we deserve.
Yeah.
Hey, Erica,
Now,
go ahead, Rob.
Oh, I was just going to say it's on those inspiring words, it's like, it's shameless plug time. Like, if people that are listening around the country are saying, I want Erica in the United States Senate, how can they help make that happen?
Yes, this is how they can make it happen. They can text join to 51550. Text join to 51550 so that you can become a part of our movement. We would like for you to follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, and also donate to the campaign. It takes money. I do not accept a dime of money from corporations, from fossil fuel executives, from gas and oil. I am one of the only candidates in this race who has taken that pledge and who refuses. I didn't accept corporate PAC money in my last run, and I'm not accepting it now. So grassroots donors are very important. And as my good friend Gary Chambers said, he said to voters, if you don't financially support your politicians who you want to fight for you, then corporations will buy them. And so we're asking you to donate $5, $10, $15, $20. Any amount will be great. You can become a recurring donor. Go to our website, ericaforus.com. I'm one of us for all of us. I'm one of us who will fight for us.
That is fantastic. You've got some great lines. Hey, can somebody win without taking PAC money in North Carolina?
Yes, someone can win without taking PAC money in North Carolina. It's getting through the primary. After the primary, all the money comes in to support someone who can defeat. And in my last run, I was empowered because I was leading in every poll against the GOP incumbent, and that's despite being outspent in the primary 15-1. And so we know the strength of our broad-based coalition. People are more in tune now and seeing what Georgia did. People want someone bold enough to offer $2,000 a month checks, who's fighting for all of us and fighting to elevate and eradicate poverty.
Yeah, that's great. And how does it look in the primary? How many people are seeking the Democratic nomination for the Senate there in North Carolina?
I think there are about 8 now who are running. 3 of us are top tier candidates.
Okay. And so in addition to people making donations, if they live in North Carolina, if they know people who live in North Carolina, do you need some hands and feet?
If you live in North Carolina and you know people in North Carolina, please text join to 51550. Then you can sign up. We would love your help as we're organizing. We are in a 100 county, 100 days tour. We are traveling all over the state of North Carolina. When I get off of this podcast, I'm headed to Cherokee, North Carolina, Clay County, North Carolina. It's about a 5-hour drive from where I am now, but we're headed there because we are conceding no one. We are reaching out to everyone. If you want someone to serve you, they should be willing to come and meet you and see you. We've been traveling, and there have been people who have shared. There hasn't been a U.S. Senate candidate to come to our community in more than 50 years. So we are about empowering people. And so if you live in North Carolina, we would love for your help. We would love for you to vote for us. But for now, we would love for you to join us as we are traveling and organizing and registering new voters.
And when is that vote? When is the Democratic nomination vote?
The Democratic primary is March the 8th of 2022.
Yep.
March 8th. All
right. Erica, I know I'm sure I'm about to get a text from Morris that you need to go because I know you've got to get on the road, and so we don't want to hold you long. Erica, we love you. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. Thank you for sharing your vision for not just North Carolina but for the country. And we get back out on the road with the Vote Common Good bus, and we're driving through North Carolina. We would love to be with you.
Yes. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Congratulations, Erica. Thanks.
Thanks.
Wow. Isn't she great? That was
really fantastic. Doug, there's this fascinating trend that, you made the point that, well, let me say it this way. There's this fascinating trend that with the victory of Reverend Warnock, and there seems to be this I get asked a lot by journalists, tell me about, progressive faith leaders that are running for office, give me a list. And more and more and more, that list is, Black clergy that are running for office. And, Cori Bush in Missouri, Reverend Warnock, Erica's running, here in Arkansas, Chris Jones is running for governor. It seems like that there is a door that's opening there. That's gonna that's a trend that we need to watch. That is going to be really interesting to see these Black clergy that are trained in liberation theology, bringing that policy, bringing that perspective into policy that can make a difference, not just for their community, but for the whole country. It's an interesting thing to keep an eye on.
Yeah, boy, I think you're right, and I hope that continues. Mm-hmm. And when you do a quick scouring of the people who have run, which we've done informally through all of our interviews and candidate contacts, how many people in the Democratic system who are running for office are from the family, the religious family business?
Mm-hmm.
I just think about all the people we've met. They're like, oh yeah, my dad, my mom, they were a pastor, and I grew up in this kind of, they just don't talk about it. And again, I know I belate this point, but I'm going to continuously. Republicans will find themselves a religious story no matter what. Right, so to the point that Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump are held up as these great icons, have nothing to do with any personal connection to religion. And Democrats will just stay silent on it over and over and over. And these people doing this really great work. And I think that it's because we as a nation, and especially in the Democratic system, allow a little more space for Black clergy to be outward in their political work, because we know that there's such confidence in the Black church vote in this country, and that same thing happens on the Republican side with other people of faith, and that's a really important space for a change. And people like Erica, as Raphael and others have done, can really be catalysts in doing that. There's that old saying that the things that when a social movement happens, people say it seems impossible until it happens, and then it seems inevitable, right? Mm-hmm. And this feels like one of those reasons for that axiom, right? Is that something's afoot, something's happening here.
Yeah.
Well,
and
wouldn't it be better to have her than a bunch of insurrectionists?
Absolutely. I've known Erica for a few years, and she's authentic and just really fantastic and willing to learn. I've seen her kind of grow over the last couple of years in terms of how she talks about some of the policy things, which just she's fantastic. I think she's great.
Yeah,
rooting for her big time.
Yeah, and I really hope. I know policy, and she needs to talk about policy now because that's what gets primary voters, because that's an insider thing. Then you have to pivot to the other issues for people that don't know anything about policy. They're the people that vote in the general elections are people that watch the Super Bowl and aren't really sure what the rules are, but they're there for all the other things that go on. And when people start talking about quarterback swaps and routes that receivers are running and what formation they're in, these people's eyes just sort of roll. So Democrats have to pivot at some point from winning the nomination to being the general election candidate and start pulling those people. And pivot's probably the wrong word. They have to be doing both of those in different measures all the time.
Yeah. It seems like she's got some great one-liners that those kinds of things matter to be able to brand yourself. And
I was writing them down, and those are great.
And that's the kind of thing that can really help in a prime, and not in the primary, but in a general election. So,
man, the catchphrases are, as somebody from the Jesus tradition, that guy was full of those things. Love your neighbors, you love yourself, do good unto others. Jesus is full of that stuff, right? Think everything you know about Jesus. They're kind of a quippy little one-liner about a tweet length. And if someone can rally those, and I know for a lot of people, some of that is, that healthcare is a right. That's a catchphrase that sort of captures people. But there's other phrases I think that really tap on the heartstrings, and Erica seems like the kind of person that knows those and can deliver that. So I think she could be an extraordinarily formidable candidate.
Yeah,
she can win. Do you know anyone else running for the nomination, Democratic nomination? Is she as a top three? Is she in good stead?
Yeah, I think what bodes well for her is that a lot of Democrats in 2020 in North Carolina had a little bit of buyer's remorse. Erica lost to a white man Cal Cunningham was his name, who then, that was a very winnable seat for Democrats. That was one of those seats that was projected for, and it feels like Democrats kind of underperformed in terms of Senate races. There was a lot of people who thought that their majority would be a lot bigger than it is. And, I remember James Carville talking to you and me, Doug, and saying Democrats were going to win 10 seats in the Senate. And that North Carolina seat was one of them. And Cal Cunningham had kind of boring white guy image, and then had a sexting scandal that happened. And I think there was a lot of buyer's remorse from Democratic primary voters that oh shoot, we picked the wrong person. And I think that bodes really well for Erica, because she's got the name recognition with Democratic primary voters who might regret that they didn't pick her last time. Well, and so now that she's going for the other seat, I think she's got a real good shot.
Yeah, she's in the sweet spot of being able to run again for a Senate seat 2 years later. So almost continuously, she's been able to just kind of keep. I know she had a break between the primary and the election, but that's different than a lot of people who feel that because Senate terms are so long, 6 years, if you're only going to run against that person, the one senator in your state, or if their elections are closer, 4 years or 6 years apart, boy, that's a lifetime in politics. Where 2 years can feel like a contiguous kind of run that's going on. So yeah, I hope so too. I hope she can really build on that. I don't know, of famous politicians, and maybe all of them, Joe Biden might be the only one who didn't lose before they won. The guy just won every stinking election he's been in, which is still bizarre to me, right? But most people lose and then come back for a win. That's sort of how it goes. It's she said the Muhammad Ali line. So, well, what a great full morning. Happy Tuesday, July 6th to all of you. It can't live up to the 4th and the 5th, but let's make July 6th the best day that it can be. All right, everybody. Hey, we'll see you later. See you tomorrow. Faith Day, by the way, around here.